Hi, this is Louise from Happiest Hounds Dog Training, and this is a short clip to talk about some key points when it comes to dogs and some common misconceptions in dog training too. So in our puppy classes, we train giving our dogs choices. Choices are so important for welfare, and like I mentioned in previous clips, we're going to be putting a lot of responsibility on the puppies to make decisions, and this will mean that your dog will be mentally tired. You'll go home with a nice tired puppy at the end of the class. But on the flip side, we're never going to force our dog to do things. We don't like it when our choice is taken away. We need to learn how to read our dogs, and if they're telling us that they're stressed in a certain situation, we need to be the custodian of your dog and then get your dog out of that situation. It could be if a group of people are coming over to pet your dog, or just one person's looming over their head, or a group of dogs or one particular dog is running towards yours and they're trying to hide or show us different signs that they're uncomfortable and need to be moved out of the situation. So remember, you're the voice of your dog. So if you need to get your dog out of a situation, then do, and learn to read the signs of your dog telling you that they're uncomfortable. In your PDF files that were emailed to you, there's some posters that show dog body language. They're fantastic pictorial representations of subtle and not so subtle signs that your dog's uncomfortable. And also there's a fantastic chart which is called the ladder of aggression. Another great word for it is the ladder of communication that was written by a behaviourist called Kendall Shepherd. So the life skill "I have the right to be a dog" is one of my favourites, because sometimes we forget that dogs are doing behaviours that drive us crazy, and actually it's just them being a dog. So if they're digging up your garden, yes, it's inconvenient and we don't want them to do it. However, let's give them an outlet for that behaviour. So give them a sand pit with some safe sand. You could find an area of the garden that they're allowed to dig. Bury their toys in it so that they're encouraged to dig in that particular place. Giving them investigation opportunities as well, like sniffing. Dogs see the world through their nose. It's so important that they get to sniff their environment. This also tires our dogs out mentally as well. So you could give a third of their breakfast as a little find it game. So make sure they're not starving. They can have 2/3 of it in their bowl. And the last third you actually sprinkle around the garden or around the house and send them on a find it game. So they're actually using their nose to sniff out the rest of their biscuits. So we're going to talk about a couple of common misconceptions in dog training now, dominance being one of them. And a number of decades ago, a scientist and his team studied wolves in captivity, and they saw a lot of conflict over space and food, etc. And they came up with a theory that there was a sort of alpha pair and everyone else was subordinate to them. What happened is it kind of got leaked out into dog training, and they thought that we could apply that to domestic dogs. What they actually saw in captivity were wolves that wouldn't be together in the wild. They wouldn't be in the same group, and there was much less space than there would be in the wild as well. So the conflict they saw was over resources. The problem was that you couldn't actually apply this to the domestic dog in a human setting, and even if you could, we're not dogs, and we can't apply any of those rules about being the leader, or needing to eat before our dog, or walk through a door before our dog, and teaching our dogs they're at the bottom of the pile. We're not dogs. The dogs know that we're not dogs. We're not the same species. So actually it doesn't make any difference. At worst, it can actually damage the relationship between us and our dogs. So the easiest thing with regards to dominance theory, pack leader, dogs being subordinate, the easiest thing is just to forget about it. However, it's worth mentioning because it does come up in dog training on TV and in books. So it's been disproven by science, and it's been disproven by science for a number of years. However, as a human hierarchical society, it's something we've latched onto, and it's been quite hard for the dog training community to let it go in some areas. So it's worth mentioning because you may come across it, but it's been disproven by science, and it's not something that we use to train our dogs nowadays. Another common misconception is that of guilt. Now, our dogs don't actually feel guilt. Dogs live in the moment. We mentioned in another slide on a previous clip that dogs do what works for them. And this little dog here has had a great time ripping up all this tissue, and if that happens when you come home, then it's our fault for leaving it in reach. So you see the guilt shaming videos on YouTube of the dogs when somebody comes home and finds their shoe has been chewed up, they're showing it to the dog's face, and the dog's actually cowering away, showing the whites of their eyes, turning their head, yawning. Now, they're actually all signs that the dog's stressed and uncomfortable with how the human is behaving towards them. It's not the dogs that are feeling guilty. There's been a number of studies that have actually proven that dogs don't feel guilt. They live in the moment, they do what works for them. So again, dogs don't feel guilt, they live in the moment. So it's about us setting up the environment so they can't chew up things we don't want them to chew when we can't see, for example. So the biggest tip really is to focus on what you want your dog to do. Instead of don't do this, don't do that, let's teach them what we want them to do instead. Set up the environment so they don't actually do the things and do the behaviours we don't want them to do. Let's focus on what we want them to do instead. Thanks for listening.